state of Wisconsin is one of the many states that approved the truth in sentence law. It is currently housing more than 22,000 people in the Department of Correction. That's not including the federal system or those in the county jail. It's 5,000 more than the capacity the state prison can hold. What are the causes of the overcrowded prison population in the U.S.? Milwaukee is a huge piece of the puzzle to the answer here on Somewhere in Wisconsin.
Mass incarceration to me is the fact that, and I don't remember, I'm not precise with the data, but over the past couple of decades, I think maybe 70s or 80s, that we've had not an increase dramatically in crime, but we have had a dramatic increase in the incarceration of our citizens. We have one of the highest, or the highest, mass incarceration rate of large countries. And so it means that we've got American citizens in large numbers behind bars and in jails. These are people who are not able to effectively contribute to society, contribute to families, and it seems to be a function of the way our systems are designed that we end up with this large number of people in jail and in prison.
We have about a little bit over 22,000 people who are currently incarcerated in our state prison system, not including the federal system or our county jails. That's about 5,000 people more than capacity of what our state prisons can hold. Our prison population has tripled since the year 1990. So in that time frame, we've seen a real boom in our prison population go from manageable to cataclysmic. As far as race and things, well, African Americans only make up about 6% of our state population. They make up close to 50% of our prison population. Most of the individuals that are sitting in our prisons today are coming from fairly urban areas. So in Milwaukee County, though making up about 24 or 25% of our of our state population, we make up a good half of our prison population as well, coming from areas like Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay.
I've been to the detention center, which is now known as the Bell Phillips Center. I've been there 15 times. I've been in most of the group homes that have existed in the Milwaukee area. I've also been to numerous residential treatment centers outside of Milwaukee County. I've been to Ethan Allen Boys School, which is a juvenile prison. I've been to New Lisbon Correctional Institution, Dodge Correctional Institution, Milwaukee Secure Detention Facility, and Prairie du Chien Correctional Institution.
The state of Georgia is making me do, it's called the pretrial intervention diversion.
I was in prison for 24 years. When I was there, after receiving so much time, it takes a lot of time to process. After you get so much time, it takes so, because you haven't even thought that long about a future or anything. So now it's time you have to refocus your mind to adapt to the situation and somewhat make it to the out day, and everything in between, you must survive.
When we talk about the prisons that we have and we talk about what's good for our community, I think that the best way to address it is not always to build high-cost prisons.
The only thing that the juvenile justice system really does is prepare young people for the adult criminal justice system. And you see that a lot, where by the time young people come out, if they haven't gone in traumatized, they come out traumatized. You know, if they didn't have a mental health condition when they went in, they have it by the time they come out. If they weren't violent when they went in, by the time they come out, they've learned how to be violent.
Mass incarceration disrupts families, tears families apart, and it has a devastating impact on entire communities, especially communities in Milwaukee that have been most disproportionately harmed by mass incarceration. The impact of incarceration is not experienced equally across neighborhoods throughout Wisconsin. Wisconsin incarcerates African American men and Native American men at a higher rate than any other state, and it's going to have a destabilizing impact on neighborhoods that are most directly impacted, because it's tearing families apart, and it's unnecessary in so many cases. It's community-based alternatives to incarceration would be better. We need to invest a lot more in community-based alternatives to incarceration, and the money that's being wasted on institutionalizing individuals, the money that's being wasted on unnecessarily incarcerating people in so many different prisons, should instead be used to build safer and stronger communities in Milwaukee and throughout the state, especially in the communities that have been most disproportionately harmed by mass incarceration.
It puts us in a budget deficit as a state that prides itself on electing people who are fiscally responsible. We are far from it. We're overspending in every way on incarceration, and not funding the kind of things that would actually return a profit to society. When men come out and women come out and get a job, they're going to pay a rent. They're going to. The gentleman I just worked with is paying a car note every month. He's generating income for our whole society. We want economic growth. Well, let's put the folk who should be out there to work, and the ones who are motivated are finding jobs, because we have organizations and entities surrounding them to help them be successful. And so, it's how it affects Wisconsin is it's a financial drain, and then there's an emotional toll that's paid. My heart has been broken for what's happening at Lincoln Hills with our young men who are sent far away from the surroundings that they know into an area where virtually no one has an understanding of their cultural background, of their ethnic heritage, of what it feels like to walk in their skin, and so they get in trouble there. They get sent to the system there, and it creates just an emotional toll, a separation of people of European descent and people of African descent across the state, and let alone the terrible mistreatment that took place there. But those are criminal acts that should be dealt with.
We're fighting for due process on revocation hearings versus the present administrative law judge system, which has no burden of proof. People are being wrongfully revoked for rule violations. Don't commit new crimes. It's called crimeless revocations. The whole criminal justice system and the revocation process in the state of Wisconsin is fraud. It's unjust. It's not fair. There is no due process to the law.
I was convicted of an OWI in 2005. I was sentenced to a total of 16 months in and 36 months out. That's 52 months in prison. I successfully completed 28 months of my 3-year supervision in Arizona before relocating to Costa Rica to manage a large-scale land development project that had been planned years earlier. I was on minimum supervision in Arizona, meeting with my agent once every 4 months. Oftentimes, the form of our meeting was leaving a message with the receptionist, or she'd come by the home and leave a business card in my mailbox. That constituted our meetings. So in my mind, I figured, my leaving 6 or 8 months early, in my mind at that point in time, I thought it wasn't a big issue. In any event, I was absconded, and from my supervision, I relocated to Costa Rica without prior permission. On June 20th of 2014, 6 years later, my father was dying at age 93. So I jumped on a plane and I flew into Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I was arrested at the airport by the Border and Immigration Customs agents because of a outstanding warrant by the Department of Corrections, DOC. I was never offered an alternative to revocation. I went to the MSDF after being extradited from Florida. I was held for 11 months in unspeakable conditions at MSDF, waiting to go to prison. I was revoked for all 3 years. And they said that due to the fact of the need to protect the public. While I was incarcerated in those 3 years, I lost my mother and my father. I didn't even have a chance to see them. I missed the funerals. My personal life, my business reputation, and financial losses have been staggering and debilitating. Nothing can ever replace my losses or the loss of my life and these opportunities.
Close down SDF. The DOC is using the building for other purposes than what it was designed for. People are committing suicide in there. There was a death last week. More than 5 people have died there in the last few years. Close down SDF.
Imagine yourself in my shoes after a 2005 conviction, sentenced to 52 months, and I'm still doing time today on supervision.
Mass incarceration is not working. Now, we understand people do some terrible crimes, and right, they must pay for them. But I think a more humane way is when they get there, just like you have drug programs for people who do drugs, and you have I'm talking about to address the human being, try to provide avenues where he can have more tools when he reach society. Because these people that is demonized, the worst of the worst, the terrible people, they will be your neighbors at some point or another. So how you want your neighbor to be? Disgruntled, angry, mad, and just like that. And angry, mad, no tools, can't contribute to society. Okay, he took a lot from society by society had to pay for him being there through their tax dollars. Don't you want to pay some of it back? And the only way he can do it if he got a job, and especially if he got housing. So in that sense, so society, what you want? You want the ruffian or the enlightened? What you want, society? That's your question.
If you are from a disadvantaged background or you don't have the resources necessary to ensure that your life can be improved, or that you are making good choices in life, there's a high probability that you will be in situations where you will make decisions that could bring you into the criminal justice system. And the reason for the decisions can vary. It can be just survival, or you're just trying to do what you can to protect and provide for your family. But if you make decisions that, in essence, result in criminal charges, then you're more likely to find yourself in a position where you come before a judge, and your potential of getting incarcerated is much higher.
I had a lot of family issues at home, a very dysfunctional family, which kind of drove me more into being involved in the streets, because that became more my family than my own family, my blood relatives. And I kind of started to gravitate into alcoholism, and that led me into getting into a lot of fights and making bad decisions. Most of those issues kept going on all the way into my adulthood and led me into the adult system as well.
I was living in the fast lane, out in the streets, just hustling, wheeling, dealing, doing drugs, just living a crazy fast life. I couldn't sit still. Just a lot was going on, and all of a sudden I went from, how they say 0 to 100. I went from 100 to 0, and the first 10 days in there was really me just couldn't believe I was in there, wanting to get out, making calls, trying to get out, trying to get bail, trying to do all that, couldn't. So then it came to a point where I just accepted it.
The criminal justice system in my community, a lot of people have had run-ins with the criminal justice system. And after you have a run-in with the criminal justice system, it's like you mark for life, like Cain. Everywhere you go, it's hard to get a job. It's easier to get a job than to get housing. You know what I'm saying? Because once you check that box, look, it's over with. So if you can't find nowhere to anchor, how you gonna keep a job? How you gonna stay on, how you gonna successfully finish parole or probation if you don't have a place? So housing is real big. And then poverty. If you got a mother who is stressed in, maybe because she's a single parent and she work, and your father may be incarcerated or can't find a job, or and stuff like that, and then you see other people with the things you want. They probably don't get it the legal way, but they getting it. So you, why not? And then you be a part. You get some things you want. You be able to provide steak with the beans and rice for your family. And right, it's like, hey, the consequences come later in that sense. And people shouldn't have to be put in that position, not in this society.
Many people are already coming from neighborhoods that are disadvantaged in many ways in Milwaukee, that already have high rates of poverty, high rates of violent crime, and they're especially in Milwaukee, high rates of unemployment to begin with. And then coming out on the back end, so after a person gets a felony conviction, it makes it even more difficult to make a successful transition or to be successful in different ways. And this is just adding on to the problems that many communities experience already. It's making communities worse and less safe, and making it, especially with employment, making it nearly impossible for people to find living wage jobs, which would allow them to support families and to move families out of poverty. We have to work together, we have to come together as a community to tear down the barriers to successful reentry, and that's a key. When people find living wage employment and find stable housing after they return from prison, they're much less likely to return to prison.
Milwaukee has a serious problem in terms of putting people in a position where they're not making those decisions that bring them before a court.
We're starting off from kind of a failed assumption that we need to lock people up, especially kids, where we really should be looking at it the other way, which is what do we need to do to reinvest in our community to make sure that people have the access to healthy and happy lifestyles that can reduce the need for incarcerating people, as opposed to looking to how to lock more people up.
The old way of creating systems that support and service young people was to put them into these big box facilities that are very large, built to economies of scale so they could save money and throw them all in one place. But we know that system and that way of doing things does not work. It's ineffective and it's expensive. So it's really focused about alternatives and what you can do to make sure that young people have access to the same community supports that can keep them out of trouble. Beyond that, just relying on incarceration does not all of a sudden give better outcomes for young people and keep them from being stuck in the system in the future. So we have to really rethink the way that we work this system so that it actually will create the outcomes that we need so young people can have access to post-secondary opportunities and education and be on a path to be contributing members of our community.
Truth in sentencing, it's called a determinate sentence. Before we had truth in sentencing, we had what was an indeterminate sentence, and that was that if the court or the judge said 20 years, then that individual would serve about a quarter of their time, a quarter to half of their time, and then would be eligible for parole. Under truth in sentencing, the court sets a term of confinement, and then that's followed by a term of extended supervision. That term of confinement, that initial confinement, you have to serve each and every day of that initial confinement. So if the judge says 20 years of initial confinement, you serve 20 years. Then you are released to what is called extended supervision, and that's kind of a parole continuation of probation. And it is during that time that you are technically have been reintegrated back into the community, but you're still subject to those years of extended supervision. You can be revoked and sent back to prison. The way I often explain it is it's a sentence that, depending on how an individual serves their initial term of confinement and how they are doing on their extended supervision, they can, in essence, serve a 20-year sentence, have 10 years of extended supervision, and then be on probation on paper for 9 years 364 days, and on that last day, that 365th day, they violated a rule of that extended supervision, they can be sent back to prison for the 10 full years. So they served 20 years, they served 9 years and 364 days on extended supervision. They get revoked on that last day. Now they're subject to another 10 years of confinement. So really what has gone from 10 to 9 to another 10, almost another 40, so a 40-year sentence. So it is conceivable that an individual could spend the rest of their life under the jurisdiction of the state based on one sentence that's imposed. Is that right? That's the way the law is. Does it mean that the person doesn't get a second chance? Well, some could argue, well, they were given a second chance. They never should have committed the crime in the first place. They were given extended supervision, but they failed. What were the reasons that they failed? You know, sometimes the rules of extended supervision are extremely complex. There are some rules that govern how much cash a defendant can carry in their pocket. So if you're on extended supervision and the department says, well, I don't know where you got the $200 that was in your pocket, but that's a violation of your rules, you can be revoked and sent back to prison. Not that you committed a new crime, but you essentially violated one of your rules of extended supervision.